Look, this could be us. But you treekin', Cinetreakin'. In this video, I will be reviewing the new Cinetreak Touch S, the new all-in-one switcher, streamer, mixer from Cinetreak, and I will be comparing it to the ATEM Mini ISO and ATEM Mini ISO Extreme, specifically for my work doing mobile podcasting. And in my process, break down how I run my video podcasting setup for clients. Now, disclaimer, Cinetreak did provide this unit to me for free to review, but this is not sponsored and they do not get to see the video before it goes live. With that out of the way, the reason why I agreed to review the Touch S is because I have been looking for something to replace or at least compete with my ATEM ISO switches from Blackmagic, specifically for mobile podcasting, which makes up a part of our video production offerings at Campfire Studios. When we began podcasting, the ATEM switches were essentially the only affordable video recorder switches in town. But in the last couple of years, they've been receiving some very healthy competition from brands like FeelWorld, OC, and Cinetreak. In fact, the ATEM line of switches does seem quite out of date by comparison and is in desperate need of a refresh. And yes, they do have a new ISO switcher due to be released, I believe, in the next few weeks. But in the meantime, the competition here is getting fierce. Now, we run podcasts from the studio behind me. This studio remains permanently set up to service our clients, but we've also taken our setup on the road. And whenever we do, it's always a massive undertaking requiring a lot of pre-planning and setup. And part of the main reason for this is that using a Blackmagic Atem ISO switcher comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of additional accessories and requirements to get it functioning smoothly outside of a studio environment. What's appealing about the Cinetreak Touch S is, yes, its massive 10-inch touchscreen, and the fact that it is a complete all-in-one switcher and streamer. You can monitor your feed, you can switch between your cameras, you can record directly to an SD card or an SSD drive, and you can stream live or send a feed to something like OBS to stream out or record as a form of backup. But it essentially replaces all the additional equipment you need when using an ATEM switcher and fits it all into one convenient package. So our general setup for podcasting is 3 cameras and between 2 and 4 guests, 2 close-ups, 1 wide shot. From the cameras, we need to run 3 HDMI cables into our ATEM switcher. From the ATEM switcher, we need to run an HDMI to USB adapter into our computer to get to monitor the ATEM's feed and record another backup. We also normally run a mixer, the Rodecaster 2, or when on the road, the Zoom PodTrack P4 into the ATEM for audio. Then we live switch our podcasts as they happen in real time, meaning that by the end of a podcast, we already have a pre-edited version ready for polishing and a final edit. This is why having a switcher is so important, because it means that when you finish recording a podcast, you've removed a huge portion of the post-production video process before you've even had to start it. The problem with the ATEM Mini Pro ISO and the ATEM Mini Extreme is that they don't have built-in monitors, and their audio inputs are notoriously bad and prone to causing issues. And while this isn't really a full review of the ATEM switches, I have to say that they have been very problematic. A throwback to the bad old days of Blackmagic, the dark times where their products offered excellent value but dubious reliability. I've frequently had ghost recordings where the ATEM has shown that it's recording to my SSD only to find at the end of a podcast session that it has recorded nothing at all. I've also had it stop mid-recording but not tell me it stopped mid-recording because one of the cameras also stopped recording. I've had my ATEM presumably overheat and refuse to turn back on at the beginning of a shoot only for it to miraculously revive itself the following day. I've had ATEMs fail to trigger recordings to the camera despite having this feature turned on. The 3.5mm mic jacks constantly pick up feedback interference from whatever is plugged into it, to the point you need to buy a separate isolator running between it and your audio system just to get decent clean audio. In 3 years of use, I think these switches could be best described as buggy and somewhat unreliable. Also, one of their most annoying features is they don't have a on and off switch, meaning if they're plugged in, they're sapping power through always illuminated button lights. It's just so frustrating. Why no on off switch, Blackmagic? Why? Now, all that said, they still have been an excellent tool for our podcast work in general, but they also have been frustrating. So looking at them as a direct comparison to the Cinetreak, we need to acknowledge the first and biggest difference between the systems, and that is that the Blackmagic Atems do ISO recordings, hence the ISO in the name. ISO meaning isolated, meaning that the Atem will record all your streams of video separately to an SSD. And this is something that it kind of does better than most of its other competitors on the market, because not only does it record all the video streams from each camera, it also creates a DaVinci Resolve timeline which will place all these streams and add all the cut points you made while live switching, meaning that tidying up your edit, going back and making adjustments, or doing any type of re-editing is really easy and intuitive. And you can go back to the full quality camera recordings should you wish to without any real additional work. The Cinetreak does not record all the streams from your camera, just one, and the cuts you make while recording you are stuck with after the fact. So if you can see up the top here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the bottom buttons are like a preview. So you can sort of line up your shot and go, okay, this is my shot. Now I want to cut to it. I'm going to press 1. Now I've cut to that shot. You don't need to preview what you're about to see. You can do it any way you want, but in this case, I want to preview and see that if we look at the second one, you can see what I'm previewing, so I can see what shot is coming, and then I can just go to it by pressing 1. And now I've cut to my number 1 angle. And so this is the one defining reason you might still opt for an Atem over the Touch S. If only getting a single edited stream at the end of a recording session with the Touch S doesn't bother you, we can talk about some of its many advantages. Also, it should be noted you can still record on each of your cameras if you want a backup or redundancy, or to create those ISO recordings. It will essentially act as ISO files to allow you to make further edits in post-production should you need to. Let's look at the current pricing. The Cinetreak retails for $800, while the ATEM Mini Pro ISO is cheaper at $545. But that is a little bit misleading. Obviously, the Cinetreak itself is a more complete system due to its giant inbuilt touch monitor, but the Cinetreak also has 4 HDMI ports and 4 SDI ports, and can take up to 4 camera inputs at a time. The ATEM Mini Pro only has 4 HDMI ports, and if you get the ATEM SDI Pro, you only get 4 SDI ports with no HDMI, and it costs $875, which is $75 more than the Cinetreak, which has both, and you can mix between. If you graduate to the ATEM Extreme ISO, you're looking at $1,425 for the HDMI version, which I have, which can take up to 8 streams of camera video, but no SDI, and the SDI version is another $200 at $1,625, but loses all the HDMI ports. The Touch S gives you the best of both worlds and is definitely providing real value for money here. Now, the Touch S biggest selling point is its touchscreen. The Atem requires an external monitor of some kind to function, and ideally a proper computer to utilize its Atem software controls. If we have a little look here, this fader on the side gives us all the cool tools. So we could do a mix. Ooh, we could do a dip. We can do these side pans, left and right, up and down. We can do these kind of fancy ones coming in, Again, this speaks to the all-in-one nature of the Touch S and the slightly disjointed nature of the Atem switches. If you're using all Blackmagic cameras, you do have the additional ability to control the settings of the cameras through the ATEM switcher software and trigger recording, which is certainly very helpful. The Cinetreak is not built to be part of an ecosystem, so you can't, for example, trigger the cameras to record through it in the same way that you can with the ATEMs. But if we sort of look at the layout of the Blackmagic Atem Extreme, well, it's hard to know where to even start. I mean, I can safely say I haven't touched 90% of these buttons, and if I have, I've probably created a problem doing it. Blackmagic are the innovators of simple, intuitive design, but it really hasn't translated over to these switches. In some ways, the Cinetreak Touch S feels more like a Blackmagic UI than Blackmagic's own offerings. It's simple, straightforward, and intuitive in a way that means we could set this up for a podcast session, look at none of the instructions, and figure it all out to ensure we had a smooth session. We took the Cinetreak for a big day recording 3 mobile podcasts, and it performed incredibly well. You can see our setup here. We ran Rode Wireless Pros directly into one of the mic inputs and 3 HDMI camera feeds. We recorded these podcasts via the USB port to an SSD drive. We also had it outputting to our computer via OBS as a backup, which we always do when using the ATEMs as well. The difference is when using an ATEM, we are entirely reliant on the laptop feed to monitor and make our cuts. Here we could just monitor everything via the massive touchscreen. In the future, we wouldn't bring that laptop, allowing us to really leverage the all-in-one nature of the switcher. We also didn't have any issues with audio buzz or interference, which has plagued the ATEMs. In terms of the recording, we recorded in the highest quality, which is 30 megabits per second. This meant each 1 hour podcast was between 8 to 10 gigs. This seems to be about similar to the size of the ISO ATEM files, although they are normally more like 6 gig per video stream, and the edited version is closer to 4 gig in its highest quality setting. So the quality of the stream from the Cinetreak may be just slightly higher. Once again, all of these switches can only stream in HD, regardless of the signal they receive, so no 4K podcasts unless you go back to the original camera footage. Now, if you want a really deep dive on the switcher, I suggest watching Geeky Nerdy Techie's overview of this, as he provides much more detail and insight than I ever could, and I'll link that in the description. However, I do want to highlight some of Cinetreak's more useful features and settings I appreciate for the work I do. So on the back, we have 4 SDI and 4 HDMI ports. Just to be aware, you can't record more than 4 inputs at a time, but you can run a mixture of SDI or HDMI. We have 2 3.5mm ports here, and these do take a line signal if you want. Now, if you're wondering how you could bring in podcast microphones that require phantom power, you could run a mixer directly into one of those ports, or you could set up your XLR audio connection to one of your cameras. So for example, I plug in my S1 Mark II with the XLR module on top, I run my microphone into the camera, and then I use the HDMI feed of that camera's audio. First of all, I'm recording podcasts, so I'm not normally doing all this stuff. And if I'm recording podcasts, I might need a feed from an audio source like this. And how do you get an audio source like this that needs phantom power into the Cinetreak? Well, you've got 2 options. You can run it through a mixer. So you run the mixer into one of those 3.5mm ports and it will work just fine. Or you can do what I'm doing right now, which is I have an XLR on the top of my Panasonic S1 II, and that is feeding phantom power to this audio, and then I am feeding the HDMI feed of both the audio and video into input 1. So if I go to input 1, which is this shot here, I can actually turn on the audio stream coming from input 1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this mic 1, and I'm going to turn on input 1. Okay, and now this is coming from input 1. So now you're getting the good Earthworks audio coming directly in from the Panasonic through that HDMI port, and that is how you can get better audio or audio with phantom power and that sort of thing. We've got all these audio inputs and outputs, And what I did is I just turned on that one and I turned off mic 1. But we can do other things too. For example, if we cut to input 3, but we want to hear a little bit of Mario and a little bit of me, if I turn this on and I turn this up, you're going to hear the audio coming through from this Super Mario, and you're going to hear my audio. I'm not sure if you can hear that. I'll turn it up just a little bit more just so to make sure, but you'll be getting both audio streams that way, and I can turn that down. So this is really good if you want to talk over something, but you want a little bit of that audio playing as well in the background. That is sort of how you can really simply and easily control your audio sources, what's coming in, what's coming out. And now I'm going to switch back to my microphone. I've just turned off the audio stream coming from my camera, and I'm just now using the DJI mic, which is running directly into the Cinetreak. The only thing to note about HDMI audio is that there will be some type of latency and lag, and that is what these little sliders do. If we have a little look here, these little sliders do, you can adjust the latency so you can get everything back in sync as you're recording. You get 2 HDMI outputs and 1 SDI output. So for our podcast, we ran one of these HDMI outputs to our computer via HDMI to USB converter and into OBS, which gives us another way to record the stream from the Touch S. But I believe we could also have used the UVC port to connect directly with the computer. You get a USB-A port to plug in your SSD to record your feed, or you can record your feed using an SD card slot for the same purpose. But you can also preload images and video to play while streaming through these. You also have an Ethernet port for live streaming. The Touch S can do up to 60 frames per second, and as you can see, we have these handy menus to configure our frame rate, and we can choose our input and outputs. And also we can choose how high quality our final recording is going to be. I would normally opt for the highest streaming rate here if I'm recording a podcast, but would lower that if I was actually live streaming probably. You can see this is my recording menu, and you can see a few different options here. I've got my bit rate, which I have at its highest, but you could turn that down. I would normally have it its highest for podcasting, but if I was live streaming, I'd probably turn that down to maybe 15 or 20. You can see my storage here. You can have USB first or SD first. I'm recording to USB, so I want to keep it on USB first. You can see my frame rates here. I've got 24, 25, 30, 50, and 60, and that's all I need. I'm totally happy with that. I'm recording in 25 because I recorded the podcast in 25, so 25 all round here. And then you can change, you've got your format here, which is MP4, TS, and FLV. If we have a little look at our HDMI, you can see where things are going to go. So we can see our output frame rate is set to 25 frames per second. You can see that in aux 2, I'm recording this whole panel to a separate screen, and you can see what inputs we have on there. This is the home screen and what the home screen looks like. You can see how long I've been recording for, and I've got various things that I can throw to. Now in podcasting, generally, I just do hard cuts between the cameras, as you can see here. But with this, you have a little crossfader bar, so you can do gradual transitions between shots. If we have a look, I've just selected this. This is for playing media, okay? So for example, if I wanted to load up some footage and maybe a logo while doing stream, I can play those here. So I can add my logo and have it placed where I want it on the screen. I can play a clip that I want to talk about or discuss, and I can turn up the volume on that feed as well, or I can throw up an image. Go to local, you can actually see that there is some media here that you can play, and to play that I have to press media, so we can see a preview of it here, and then I press it up here, and now we're playing straight out of an SD card or something like that. So if you wanted to throw to something that you had preloaded, you can do that very easily. You can also do picture-in-picture, which is just very handy to do. Again, if you're talking about something specific you want to directly reference, or you're doing a watch-along, or you're streaming a game, anything of that nature, this is the setting you can utilize.
So if we want to do picture-in-picture, we've got to click on this little menu here. So we choose what picture we want. In this case, I'm going to pick the camera that's going directly to me, and I'm going to add it to the program. And you can see now that I pop up there in the corner, and even if I switch, you can see that I have still remained in that corner. I can move the camera in frame to put my head potentially in a better position, or I can move the entire thing around to put me somewhere else in frame. So the best way to use picture-in-picture is to be talking over something. So you might be talking over a game as you're playing it. We could be talking about something like The Shining, right? And we could be seeing what's going on and hearing a little bit of it, and I'm like, man, remember this scene? I must be out of my goddamn mind. Jack Nicholson, the absolute GOAT.
So all in all, as a mobile podcasting unit, this is a fantastic option which will help keep your switching footprint much smaller than if you went with the ATEM ISO. But of course, it does so much more than that. It pretty much does everything you could want in a streamer mixer recorder, except that elusive ISO recording. I can live without that and just record to my cameras at the same time, but I realize that might not be for everyone. In terms of drawbacks to the unit, I only have a couple. To make this the ultimate one and done, let's never talk about a switcher again, if this had two XLR ports with phantom power to go with one 3.5mm jack on the back, this would be absolutely undeniable the best switcher in the market. And if we look at the touchscreen, which I think overall is very good, you do find that the sliders are hard to control. They're just a little bit too small to make micro adjustments. You end up pushing them too far one way or the other. They are either too sensitive or not sensitive enough to your touch commands, so they definitely feel quite fiddly. Sometimes you think you've changed something and it just doesn't register. Sometimes you're trying to make a small adjustment and you way overdo it and turn it into a huge adjustment. Other than that, I think Cinetreak have come up with an absolute banger here, one that will be replacing my ATEM setup for mobile work. Now, in terms of the studio, I think I value those ISO recordings just a little bit more because I don't have to have such a compact setup here. But essentially, to have full control of the ATEMs, you need a computer and the ATEM software. That means you need to buy a computer with the ATEM to use it fully. And that also means a laptop computer if you're taking it on the road. So even when building out new podcast setups for clients, you might suggest something like the Cinetreak as a more sensible, affordable option. All these jerry-rig solutions for the ATEM now seem a little redundant thanks to the Touch S, and that's a great compliment. I've only done my studio testing and taken it for that one intensive podcast job, so I can't speak to the Cinetreak's long-term quality, but from these first impressions, I would call it an indispensable part of any mobile live streaming or podcasting kit. And it ain't treaking if you got it. Know what I mean? If you've found this video helpful, you know what to do. Like, sub, live, laugh, love. As always, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you.